Welcome back to the State of Business Texting podcast, where we talk about all things messaging. I'm one of your hosts, Zach Kunkel, Director of Solution Marketing.
And I'm Caitlin Long, Senior Director of Product Management for Messaging here at Bandwidth. And on our podcast today, we're taking listeners behind the scenes and having candid conversations with messaging industry experts.
And today we are joined by one of those experts, Mr. Dave Michaels, the founder and lead analyst of Talking Points and a frequent columnist at outlets like No Jitter. His tagline, he's the voice of the industry for the industry.
For the industry.
Man, I love that. I love that so much.
Great tagline.
Dave, thanks for joining us.
It's a pleasure to be here, and I can't believe after all these years, I finally made it to the podcast. Thanks for the invitation.
Well, just season 2, so you made it pretty early.
Well, for several years, I was waiting for you to start the podcast. And so
yeah, that's fair.
There we go. Well, Dave, tell us a little bit about yourself and the work that you're doing with Talking Points for those who aren't familiar.
That's a really good question, and I don't know if we'll have much time for anything else once I finish. But basically, at one point I called myself a blogalist, but blogs are no longer in. I love this industry. I've always loved the industry. I actually, back in the 80s, somehow got an advanced degree in telecommunications, if you can believe that or not. And I've just always been passionate about this industry and somehow managed to find it as a career. So I follow the industry very closely. I work with a lot of the companies like Bandwidth, a lot of your customers I work with, and I write about it, and think about it pretty much every day of the week. So let's talk about communications and messaging.
Let's do it. Yeah. So as part of that, and we've interacted, right, in my past role life, I also know that you are a very prominently followed voice of the industry among enterprises as well. And so when we talk about enterprises, we're talking about, the Fortune 500 type of companies who are managing their telecommunications strategy across voice and messaging and all the like as well.
Yeah, no, I do a lot of customer events. I speak at a lot of customer events. I do everything I can to discourage talking to. I guess the No Jitter piece is kind of aimed at enterprise accounts, but I do everything I can to discourage it. The insider report that I publish, I tell people it's for the industry, but we got to keep on getting enterprise subscribers as well. So it's a little secret. We have some enterprise audience as well, but we don't talk about them. The problem with enterprises is that they're a pain. They always have weird, complicated problems, and it's just so much easier to focus on the cutting edge of what the vendors and providers are doing.
Yeah, whose ultimately end goal is to sell to those enterprises and make money. So there's sort of a necessary means to an end there for sure.
Business will be so much easier without customers. I keep saying it,
Right.
Yeah.
So I am curious though. From your experience and sort of where you sit in the go-to-market chain and who you've been talking to, messaging, what you see in messaging is a loaded question. But from our perspective, when we're looking at the messaging industry, we're looking at sort of the A2P messaging channels, which is businesses utilizing messaging for business-to-business communications. So are there any particular trends, sort of important call-outs that you are tracking right now in sort of these enterprise communications in 2025?
Well, I guess there's several, but I think the word messaging itself is kind of a loaded term. It means so many different things. People in marketing, right? It means, what is the message of the press release or whatever that you're putting out. And so messaging is just a broad term. People never know whether email is included in messaging or not. And, basically anything is messaging. And so that's the basic problem, is how do you talk about it if it's everything, and how do you talk about specific things? There's a, pendulum effect of, what's a cool way to message and what's a bad way to message. It wasn't long ago that Twitter was a very good way of messaging. And particularly for someone like me, it's a great way of meeting people and expanding my influence with other people I may not have met otherwise. But now it's not. They've completely redesigned it and renamed it and everything. And so a very, very different solution now. When, video conferencing got so popular during the pandemic, people were like, this meeting could have been an email, then it turned into this meeting could have been a message.
It's my favorite meme.
Yeah, exactly. So messaging is kind of all over the place. And so in terms of trends, certainly I was at Mobile World Congress. God, when was that? Was that January or February? I don't remember.
February, March, end of February, beginning of March. Yeah.
So I've had 2 weeks off, but I actually managed to attend something like 7 events in the first 8 weeks of the year. It was a blur. It was a bit challenging, to be honest. But one of those was Mobile World Congress, which was absolutely insane event, by the way. I got my handy dandy watch. I did 80,000 steps at Mobile World Congress, and I knew it. I definitely knew that I did 80,000 steps. But certainly at Mobile World Congress, one of the big themes was RCS, and I think RCS is kind of the new thing that I think there's a lot of excitement about. It's interesting because there's a lot of excitement about it in different places of the world, but should be a lot of excitement about it pretty much globally by the end of this year is the current prediction. And what's really interesting about RCS is there's no replacement cycle. And so one of the speakers that I heard at Mobile World Congress was talking about, I think it was the 68 Olympics, I think is what he said, that was broadcast in color, but nobody had a color TV set. And it literally took like a decade for people to replace their TVs and get color TVs. And then in the late 70s, or I guess in the 70s, all of a sudden color TV was becoming very, very mainstream, and it was assumed people had color TV.
The classic innovation versus infrastructure.
Yeah,
conflict.
and most things do, right? Electric cars. I need a charging station. I need, and so most things have this replacement and infrastructure, or if you want to use that term, build out cycle. But the thing with RCS is that replacement cycle is happening in the background at the carrier side, and so the device in everyone's pocket or purse will pretty much by the end of the year be RCS ready without any replacement costs worldwide. And I think that's pretty significant and something that enterprises need to really understand, because that's big. I mean, in parts of the world, I've been spending more time in Europe. I've managed to live my entire life in the United States and completely avoid WhatsApp, and was actually pretty pleased with that. Then I got to Europe, and you can't live without WhatsApp.
You can't avoid it.
To take a reservation at a restaurant, you have, here's our WhatsApp. Everything is WhatsApp. And as much as that is true, not everyone is on WhatsApp. But with RCS, everyone will be on RCS in the next year. And it can do a lot of the same things that WhatsApp does. And so I think that we're going to see a huge amount of change and interest, and the interest is starting to pick up. I saw this very clearly at Mobile World Congress, but it's really going to start picking up dramatically. And so there's 2 pieces, just to be clear to anyone listening or watching. There's 2 things you'll hear when people talk about RCS. There's RCS, which is the messaging standard, kind of like SMS or another kind of messaging protocol. And then there's RBM. And RBM simply stands for RCS Business Messaging, which is a way that brands can use RCS to deliver branded, secure, authenticated messages. And so both of them are becoming very important. So RBM is becoming an important tool of marketing departments and anyone reaching out to customers. And RCS is the basic capability on your smartphone and being able to receive those messages. So 2 separate conversations that go hand in hand.
Yeah, and Dave, appreciate that distinction. And you hit on the use case that we've chatted with a few other guests this season on, which is marketing. Like that's probably the quickest use case to think through how will a more engaging technology and capabilities like carousels and rich media, like what will that help marketing? It'll help transactions and conversions and buying of products from brands. But something interesting that we were chatting about just before hitting record on this was other use cases, right? And so one that we were chatting through was support. And as these enterprises and these brands are trying to support their customers, there's also a lot of promise about that comes with RBM. And so just wanted to give you a chance to speak on that.
So there's two pieces there I want to hit on, Zach, and I want to share. Living here in Europe, I've been flying on Air Portugal. Air Portugal goes by the acronym TAP, T-A-P. Mm-hmm. They send me an SMS for my boarding pass, right? And you've seen this before. It's a link. They can't send a real boarding pass because boarding passes have things like barcodes and stuff. So they have to send a link to a boarding pass. And I could just see some product manager at Air Portugal think this through. It turns out that when you scan, like when you're boarding the plane, when you scan your boarding pass, it kills the URL. The URL is disposable. It's gone. And I could just see that, it's like, oh, they boarded the plane. They don't need it anymore. I could just see this logic, right? But now imagine yourself walking down the aisle of the plane with your luggage and everything. And what are you looking for? You're looking for a seat number.
Yeah.
Yes. and where's your seat number? It's like, oh, it's on my boarding pass. Oh, I tell me my boarding pass. And you go back and say, oh, I lost it. I got to go back to the SMS link. And you click on it, and now it doesn't work. And it's just like, why don't they just send me a freaking boarding pass? So RCS will solve that, right? Because now we can send richly formatted content with things like barcodes and things like tickets and boarding passes and all kinds of coupons and anything that you want to be able to scan. RCS solves that. So that's one point. The other point with RCS that's really interesting is that it's, especially with RBM, we do this with SMS with the short codes, right? You could have a brand that has a short code or text, some short number. But RBM allows you to have basically authenticated messaging. So Air Portugal or Coke or whatever is sending out a message, and it's trusted, right? And so we have this problem now. You get a text, hi, this is so-and-so from the bank. Did you authorize this $10,000 withdrawal? Please click here if you did not. And it's usually some sort of phishing scam or something like that. And people fall for this all the time. So wouldn't it be nice if this SMS was somehow authenticated? And that's what RCS is offering. So this authenticated. So what they're finding with the limited trials that we've already got, where RCS is already beginning to get some traction, is that the conversion rates, people clicking on it, engaging with it, as opposed to an email or even a WhatsApp or whatever, are much, much higher than WhatsApp and email links and SMS links. People trust it, they understand it, it's more engaging because of the rich format. So this is opening up a lot of use cases. So brands are very excited about this. And so that's what RBM, that's going to drive a lot of stuff from RBM. And I understand, people can get RBM from what bandwidth. It's kind of convenient. So there's that story. Now, if to your point that you're asking, Zach, if brands are engaging and talking to customers and prospects through a channel mechanism, and it's a two-way channel mechanism. There's one of my pet peeves. I hate do not reply emails. I hate do not reply text. And so if people can reply to these RCS messages, and they should be able to do that, then that becomes a channel into the omni-channel contact center. And there's a big gap in the market right now because a lot of the providers are talking about RBM and getting RBM working, and a lot of the CPaaS providers are enabling it already in different parts of the world. So a lot of the providers are talking about enabling RBM, but none of the contact center providers are talking about how to manage RCS inbound messages yet. It can come in web chat, it can come on an SMS, they can come on an email, but they don't have any RCS channels. The only one that has just announced, I think it was just recently, I'm going to say in April, 8x8 announced that they're going to be supporting both RBM and inbound RCS in their contact center offering. So that's the first, but I think they're all going to do it eventually. I think it's going to have to be supported. So,
yeah. And Dave, RCS is sort of a new thing, but it's almost a new old thing, right? And I almost wonder if that's one of the reasons why we don't see a vast amount of adoption in the mainstay contact center platforms and UCaaS platforms, which we haven't actually talked about, and this is sort of a whole other set of can of worms, but we haven't had the infrastructure that we were talking about, right? We haven't had that existing in the US. It's been sort of prevalent and growing in adoption throughout the world, Brazil, India. There are hot markets where this is heavily utilized, the RCS, the P2P sort of version of the channel. And then now with the US support, Apple support really last year, you have access to that entire other half/majority of the market of users in the US. And so now it's a real thing. The carriers are on board, Google's on board with the carriers, we're rolling out surcharges, like we actually have a RCS fit for A2P messaging, RBM, that is launching in the US. And so I think the question now.
Yeah, and so I run into this. I'm glad you clarified this, Caitlin, because people say I've been hearing about RCS for 10 years, and they think they're exaggerating. I've been here for 10 years. Well, actually, it's true. It has been 10 years.
Yeah.
It's one of the worst rollouts ever. Basically, it had a whole bunch of issues. The technology was over-engineered, and every partner every carrier that was implementing it was able to implement it in a fully compatible, compliant way that was incompatible. Rephrase that. It was fully compliant, incompatible way. So the standard was so broad, and nobody was able to figure this out. So Google needed something to happen. So Google jumped in there and really started pushing and driving a path to a consistent deployment. And then the big one was, as you mentioned, Apple, because the iPhones weren't going to support RCS. And when Apple they announced it early last year, and they delivered exactly like the way they said they would late last year. And so the iPhones now support it, the Android phones support it. And more carriers are supporting it. I think all the carriers in the U.S., all the major carriers in the U.S. except for AT&T support it now. And a lot of parts of the world, there's only one carrier. You mentioned India, whatever, where they're already are supporting it. And so it's rolling out pretty quickly. And I noticed, because I have an Android phone and it's pretty clear, I notice a very high percentage of my SMS messages are RCS, and I can tell because it's got things like typing indicators and
totally
a
read
few
receipts, which is crazy on an Android.
Yeah.
After having all Apple friends, right?
Yeah. And so I'm seeing it. It's like, oh, it's actually here. Most people don't see it because it's just SMS. I'm not getting rich formatted messages. I'm not getting branded messages yet. But I know that it's RCS. So most people don't even realize that it's RCS. In fact, I've spoken to some other analysts about this. They say, I don't get any RCS messages. I say, are you sure? Pull out your phone and say, oh my God, I am getting, So, it's creeping up on us. And that's what I'm saying. There's no replacement cost, right? Or cycle, no replacement cycle. So at the end of the year, it's there. And that's huge. It's huge.
Yeah, 100%. And so to all of those points, the imagination of these both providers and enterprise customers of providers, both on sort of the contact center and the unified communications side, I think they're just starting to kind of imagine what's possible. You actually very eloquently articulated value props earlier when you were talking about RCS in general, the fact that it is a more secure channel, the fact that it is just a richer channel, the fact that it just in generally encourages more interaction, potentially more conversation, the potential for more personalized conversation.
Yeah. So now, because you pointed that out, I need to clarify something because this is causing a lot of confusion too.
Okay.
When Apple agreed to support RCS, they agreed to support the RCS standard, not necessarily all of Google's magic. And one of the things that got lost was encryption. There is encrypted RCS messaging coming, and I believe it's coming this year. I believe it's already all done and agreed on, and so it's a matter of getting the rollout figured out. But it's either this year or it's soon after. But it's coming. And so by the time we actually really are there, and we're starting to get these great secret messages in our RCS stream, they'll probably be encrypted, end-to-end encrypted, which will be nice. So currently, WhatsApp has one advantage. And I also want to point out this is the second time that Apple really put a lot of pressure on WhatsApp, because WhatsApp has this, I should say Meta. WhatsApp has this big advantage with end-to-end encryption, and people feel comfortable with it, and they're kind of the standard in a lot of European countries and other countries. But earlier, when Apple changed their cookie privacy or tracking policy on the browser, it really upset Zuckerberg and Meta, because it did not allow them to collect as much information as they were doing before. So Apple really caused Meta some trouble when they changed their browser policy. And then a year later, Apple says, oh, by the way, we have a better alternative that we're going to support than WhatsApp, and that'll make that worldwide too. So read what you want into that. But Meta's gotten too big kicks.
That's fair.
Yeah.
So you've got sort of the fallacy of security, but the value sort of thought is out there nonetheless. And then you have the richer experiences. Then you have sort of the third piece, which you kind of keep coming back to with the allusions to WhatsApp and sort of the interactions that occur within the channel, which is more of the conversational piece. And one of the things that I think of naturally when we talk about conversational is you start to get into how you support customers, which you've already talked a little bit about with sort of the contact center and the CX use case. I'm trepidatious about what you're going to say, but I'm curious. UCaaS, right? So when we actually were on stage at Mobile World Congress, Bandwidth, and so one of the things that I was presenting about is underserved use cases in the industry, and one of those is really the conversational UCaaS type of use case. And I think that there are thoughts about potentially how this could apply. I have my own perspective, sort of from a pricing and just strictly commercial perspective on whether it is fit for purpose from really the traditional UCaaS use case. But I'd love to hear your thoughts there.
Well, this is an interesting dilemma. And so, again, RCS was a 10-year plus journey, and some things didn't make the whole journey, right? So SMS was basically a mobile standard and was designed to work on mobile phones only. And RCS was not a mobile standard. It was designed to work on any phone number, which was brilliant, fantastic. Well, up until the ninth inning, and RCS finally was making its way through final stages of getting approval, and Apple and everybody. And they said, we have no way of really managing this, and we have no authority to manage all these phone numbers. It's just going to be a nightmare. Let's just, for now, make it mobile only. So it was a pretty big compromise, but at the same time, it made it actually plausible and it's rolling out. So in the UCaaS world, it's very common to have a UCaaS number that also supports SMS. And so I've got a UCaaS number that supports SMS, and I have an app on my phone that receives that. And I also have a cell phone number on my cell phone that receives SMS. So I get two kinds of SMS messages on my phone. And a lot of times you have to give your number out to different organizations when you register for something or whatever. They always ask you for your mobile number. And the reason they're asking you for your mobile number is so they can send you messages, right? And I usually fill in my UCaaS number and guard my mobile number and put that in, because I know that I'll get SMS messages just fine and everything's just fine. So that mostly works. But as we start going into an RCS world, the mobile providers will be ready at the end of this year. AT&T, come on, Ma.
Mama needs a new pair of shoes.
Yeah, there you go. But the UCaaS providers do not have, they're not MNOs, not necessarily, some of them are, but most UCaaS providers are not MNOs, and therefore cannot assign a RCS capable phone number. So now when I fill out those forms and I put down the mobile number, if I were to put down my UCaaS number, and if they wanted to send me a rich formatted, beautiful RCS message saying thank you for registering, I will not receive that. I'll receive it as an SMS message, which is like, kind of the equivalent of getting a text email instead of an HTML email or something like that. So basically, it's still broken. The next big chapter is how do we get RCS support on UCaaS numbers. Now, some providers will have this solved. If you get UCaaS from a provider that is an MNO, then it might work. And so, for example, Microsoft Teams Phone Mobile through Verizon or AT&T will support RCS. What I love is the Verizon, what's it called? One Talk, which is kind of like the most simple, the simple UCaaS solution you can get, will support RCS. But the most sophisticated, whether it be WebEx or Teams or whatever, that if you get it from them from not an MNO, will not support RCS. And so we're going to have a bit of a dichotomy there with the UCaaS numbers, which to me, I think is going to drive more UCaaS provisioning through MNOs. Things like the Microsoft Teams Phone Mobile. That may have been a little too many pieces there to that. Hopefully people followed that. If not, I'll be writing a long multi-series book on this, and you can.
There we go.
I can't wait.
And people can subscribe and buy that book, and you can see that in our show notes. Here's the link.
There you go. There you go.
No, Dave, really helpful in our articulation of the UCaaS dilemma, and that's what we're talking about on the podcast. Is not necessarily all things that are well baked and understood, but surfacing some of the discussions and ongoing problems, just to call it that.
So you guys must talk a lot about 10DLC or something on your podcast.
We have talked about 10DLC a time or two, haven't we, Zach?
Okay.
That is one way to say. Yes.
There you go.
Yes.
Yeah.
Dave, I'm gonna pivot us a little bit and allow you to put on your Sherpa hat and think through, if you could shine a spotlight on anything business A2P messaging, what would you want folks to be thinking about, paying attention to? What would you want to share?
Well, I think the biggest topic in enterprise communications in general is AI, right? And so everybody wants to talk about AI and where does it fit, and everybody has a different piece of this, different. It's like the blind man touching the elephant. Everybody has a different perspective on where AI fits and whatnot. I think it's interesting that the most revolutionary AI technology that most of us deal with is ChatGPT, which is indeed a messaging UI. It's a messaging interface. I think that we really need to think that through of where AI and messaging come together. And I'm starting to see clues of that. And it's actually very, very interesting to me what's happening. And so we were just the other day in this park and admiring these trees. And we were wondering what kind of trees they were. And so I took a picture of the tree and I sent it to ChatGPT. And I said, what kind of tree is this? Mm-hmm. And I was really surprised by the answer. First off, it answered it. That didn't surprise me. It's this kind of tree, you moron. Whatever. And then it said, you can tell it's this kind of tree because of these characteristics. It started naming. It says, normally you can tell through another characteristic, which is not shown in your picture. It's like, whoa. The reason it's not shown in your picture is because this is April and you won't see these characteristics until the fall. It's like, wow. I mean, okay. And it says, based on where you are, and it knew the city I was in, and the month I'm in, and the latitude I'm in, it had all this really customized information. All I did was send a freaking picture, and so this AI thing is really a lot more intelligent than I think a lot of us are. I just want to know what kind of tree it was. And so when you think about that from a customer service perspective or a marketing perspective or something, and you want your messaging to be extremely helpful and personalized. I saw somebody wearing these shoes. I took a picture of someone wearing shoes while I was on the bus. Do you sell these shoes? Yes, we do. That is the Nike so-and-so. And that color was only made in 2 years ago and is no longer available. Would you like it? Would you be interested in other colors? Like, I want the personalized information. I want the and it's not available in the market that you're in, or it is available and there's actually a retailer a block away from you that has it in stock. I think there's just so much more opportunity for the AI and messaging to come together in a very personalized experience.
Yeah, we actually talked about this at our Mobile World Congress session as well, because we were looking at some of the data in the industry and some of our just customer use cases as well, where we're looking at particularly e-commerce, where we're seeing a lot of innovation right now. I think to your point, it hasn't quite fully hit the contact center, which, RIP CX, but I think it's getting there. I think it's getting there. The monetization piece, though, in e-commerce, it's really prevalent, where you're seeing chatbots utilize AI to sort of increase knowledge and perception of customer preferences and then customize the conversations with customers based on that as well. And so increasing engagement, increasing conversational nature of messaging in particular is one of the trends that we were actually pointing out, which we see a more AI-driven world is just going to push the messaging to be more conversational, which one of the things that we were calling out is actually the messaging industry in the US in particular does not have a great answer for, right? Like most of our A2P templates do not facilitate a large degree of back and forth, because you start to get into like what our messaging insiders will call campaign drift, right? And so this is something that's just an open issue for the messaging industry in general to solve for, which is as sort of AI pushes us towards this more conversational, more personalized world, how are we wrapping around new best practices to help account for that? It's kind of an open question. One of the things that we're doing is looking at how can we inject an AI into our internal tools to help ensure that it's conversational and not campaign drift, right? And the LLMs and various pieces on our side can help with that as well.
Yeah, so the thing to remember is that ChatGPT changed the world, and it did it through a messaging interface. And so what's your excuse, right? So, absolutely.
So Dave, we always ask our guests one question, because we are a business texting podcast, but this can be any sort of text or any message that you receive.
42.
It's the right answer.
The lottery ball machine starts. Let's see
the
if you
hitchhikers
got
in
it.
the background, yeah.
Yeah. What's the best text that you've received in the past week?
The best text I have received is your pizza is ready.
Oh, see, man after my own heart.
Man, what'd you order?
Don't get me going on pizza. We don't have enough time on that. But
There we go. There we go. Oh, that's awesome.
That's fair.
That's awesome.
That's
I hope
fair.
it was good, whatever it was.
Yeah. Hopefully it had lots of awesome toppings on it. But
yes, it did.
that's a separate
Lots.
podcast.
Yes.
Dave, thanks so much for joining us. Really appreciate your industry insights. And if listeners do want to reach out and follow your work, where can they connect with you online?
TalkingPoints.com, Talking Points with a Z on the end. I'm pretty active on LinkedIn these days, and those are the best places.
Awesome. Thanks, Dave, again for joining us today. And thanks, listeners, for tuning in. Again, you can subscribe and catch up on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, or YouTube. Just search State of Business Texting. And you can get your free State of Messaging report, as well as information about this year's Texty Awards over at stateofmessaging.com. All right, that's it. Thanks, everyone. Thanks, Caitlin. Thanks, Dave.
Thanks,
Thank
y'all.
you.